Good evening and hello. Welcome to Science on Tap. I am your host, Jody Patterson, Director for Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. Our mission is to raise awareness and protection for Gray's Reef right here in Georgia and throughout the nation by offering opportunities to learn, engage, and act as stewards of our ocean sanctuary. Tonight's event is brought to you in support by our education partners and our sustaining sponsors. Thank you to Mrs. Kathy J. Sakis, Dr. J.T. Prather, Mr. Dan Bromstead, Ms. Susie Williams, and Mrs. Cheryl Chip, our Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation Board trustees. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I have my headphones on and am wired for sound because tonight we delve into the fascinating world of ocean acoustics and discover that it isn't such a silent world below the surface of the sea. Let me introduce you to NOAA resources and research professionals engaged in studying ocean acoustics. Joining us tonight are subject matter experts who can crank up the volume on this topic. First, I'd like to introduce our guest presenter, Mrs. Amara Davis, a student at Savannah State University who's currently completing her Master of Science degree in Marine Sciences with a research focus in spiny lobster disease. Amara is a prospective Knos Fellow, a former Olympic athlete, and a proud wife and mother. She's also interning in support of the Gray's Reef Sanctuary Soundscapes project. Hi, Amara.
Hi there.
Could you please introduce us to our guest speakers and our featured topic, ocean acoustics?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Our first speaker is the research coordinator at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, Kimberly Roberson. Kimberly began working with NOAA's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Sciences Biogeography branch in 2005. She joined the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries in 2016. Kim received her Master of Science degree from Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, where she conducted research on leatherback sea turtles using genetics to explore connectivity between nesting populations and pelagic individuals. Hi, Kim.
Hello, everyone.
From the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, we welcome Captain Todd Recicar. Todd is the UGA research vessel Sea Dog Captain and Marine Operations Supervisor. Prior to his current position, he spent 11 years captaining vessels for research and dive operations for Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. With an undergraduate degree in biology and a passion for marine research, Todd also enjoys collaborating with educators and scientists that utilize hydrophones and ROVs in their toolbox of research equipment. Hi, Todd.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Last but certainly not least, we welcome Dr. Rodney Rountree, also known as the Fish Listener. He is a marine biologist and ecologist and is recognized internationally as a leader in the development of passive acoustic technology applications for fisheries and marine exploration. Dr. Rountree is an adjunct associate professor in the biology department at the University of Victoria and holds degrees in marine biology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, the Charleston Higher Education Consortium, and a PhD in ecology and evolution from Rutgers University. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Rountree.
Great, glad to be here.
Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary is a marine protected area located offshore of Georgia's southeastern coastline. It is home for many acoustically active and sound-sensitive animals like whales, fishes, birds, turtles, and invertebrates. Gray's Reef is also located in the only known nursery grounds for the world's most endangered large whale species, the North Atlantic right whale. Gray's Reef is one of 8 national marine sanctuaries currently involved in NOAA's Underwater Sound Monitoring Program, which aims to better understand our ocean sanctuary's soundscape. The program is a partnership between NOAA and the Navy to further understand how sonar technology and other human-made sources of noise affect marine mammals. Hydrophone recordings have shown that Gray's Reef has a more natural soundscape than the other national marine sanctuaries involved in the program, because it's not near significant noise sources such as shipping lanes, military test sites, or oil and gas development. Mrs. Roberson, as a research coordinator for NOAA, what will the underwater sound study inform you about Gray's Reef and the Atlantic Ocean?
Hi, Amara. we'll be using hydrophones or underwater microphones to record noise and sound. As divers, we're limited to short bottom times and short, noisy observations, but by using these tools, we get to listen 24/7 to the sounds of the sanctuary, and we're learning what noises and sounds are produced. We've heard fish movement and communication, like the barking oyster toadfish and other loud fish, boats, rain, hurricanes, and water movement. The hydrophones sit on the seafloor, about 65 feet below the surface of the sea, and they have even recorded rain falling on the surface of the sea. From all of this, then we match these sounds and noises to animals and activities. So we learn which animals are out there and how they may be using the space at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. On the screen right now, you see the hydrophone base with Atlantic spadefish swimming around and a ledge in the background on the right near the diver.
So you mentioned hydrophones. Is that how we record animal sounds remotely underwater?
Yes, in this picture, you can see that the hydrophone tool, the recording device, is the small yellow cylinder at the top of the metal stanchion. And just above that small yellow cylinder is a tiny little microphone, a ceramic recording microphone, or hydrophone, which means it's just an underwater recorder.
Thank you. So the effects of noise on marine organisms remain poorly understood, and further research is necessary to determine how human noise influences life in our ocean. Sound energy is a form of mechanical energy and is produced when an object vibrates. These sound vibrations cause waves of pressure that travel through a medium like water. It is measured in terms of frequency and amplitude. Right whales, for example, produce a variety of low-frequency sounds like moans, groans, belches, and pulses, with most of their acoustic energy originating below 500 hertz. One typical right whale vocalization used to communicate with other right whales is the upcall. It is a short whoop sound that rises from about 50 hertz to 440 hertz and lasts about 2 seconds. Detection of upcalls have been the most common means of determining right whale presence from acoustic data, and these vocalizations are widely used for monitoring and protecting this highly endangered species. Understanding how sound travels through the ocean is part of this research as well. Submerged geologic features and seafloor sediment type can affect how sound waves move in the underwater environment. Captain Recicar, how would you characterize the reef habitats near Georgia where these recordings were collected?
Yeah, so I like to break down the seafloor types at Gray's Reef into 3 categories. The first is that of a fairly flat, sandy seafloor. Many of the inhabitants here are invertebrates such as sea stars, urchins, snails, and fish. From my experience diving in these regions, it's a pretty barren landscape as most of these organisms live under the sand. Some fish inhabit the sandy portions, but not in large schools. Out of the 3 habitat types, this is likely the quietest, as there are fewer of the vocalizing species here. The second habitat type would be a sparse live bottom consisting of scattered low-lying rocky ledges that provide anchor points for sessile or stationary invertebrates such as sponges, soft corals, tunicates, and more. These live bottom areas typically are patchy and small and don't provide much structure for larger organisms. Here we start to see more activity buzzing about as rocky substrate and invertebrates provide a place for small prey to hide and predators to feed. Because of the varied habitat, more shrimp, crabs, and small fish are tucked away in nooks and crannies. Snapping shrimp and vocalizing fish are more commonly seen and heard. The third and most diverse habitat are the well-developed sandstone ledges that rise up to 6 feet off of the sandy seafloor. These are the regions where hydrophones have been deployed. Here, the amount of live bottom is extremely dense. In many places, the ledges are even undercut, allowing large nurse sharks, fish, and turtles to seek refuge. These ledges are likely the noisiest portions of the reef due to the increased abundance of life.
So some of the sounds are easily identifiable, such as snapping shrimp and oyster toadfish. However, other sounds are still yet to be associated with their origin. What have you been able to hear and identify in the Grays Reef acoustic data?
You know, the common cast of characters and their sounds are always the snap, crackle, and pop of the snapping shrimp, the toadfish boat whistle, the swoosh sound of large schools of bait darting by, and different species of grunts, drum, grouper, and croaker are also very common. Occasionally we hear from marine mammals such as dolphin, and then some non-living sounds, as Kim mentioned, we come across are breaking waves, wind, thunder, passing vessels. My favorite sounds to discover are what I describe as choruses of what seem like hundreds or thousands of fish that are possibly aggregating for a spawning event. These choruses have not been positively matched to a species, but they're really impressive to hear regardless. And I look forward to learning more about these choruses.
Thank you. So here are a few of those animals frequently heard at Grays Reef. Human noise can act as stressors on marine organisms. It can result in masking signals such as mating calls, social communication, and echolocation, annoyance, hearing loss, and behavioral changes that are often overlooked. Research suggests that many fishes in Grays Reef are acoustically active, as are mammals, birds, reptiles, and invertebrates. Dr. Rountree, how do fish and invertebrates make sound?
Well, fish and invertebrates have a wide variety of mechanisms for sound production. Two of the most common mechanisms are stridulation sounds, which are rubbing together of hard parts such as teeth or fin spines. So things like the jacks uh, shown here in this picture produce that type of sound. Uh, Drumming sounds are very common also, and these are fishes that have a gas bladder, which is an internal sac filled with air, and they have special muscles associated with that push or pull to make drumming type sounds or knocking sounds. There's many species of fish on Grays Reef, such as the various drums, croaker, spot, red drum, black drum, and a variety of others that make these types of sounds. Also, the things like the oyster toadfish make this kind of sound. But there are other types of sounds that fishes can make, such as very poorly understood air movement sounds. Some of our guests may have heard of fish fart sounds. These are not known from Grays Reef, but probably exist. And then other types of sounds, such as percussion sounds, fin slapping, things like that, that are poorly understood. And then even recently, there have been sounds described as a chondrophone type sound, where it's basically like strumming on a harp that some fishes produce. Invertebrates also make a variety of sounds. Most of them that we're familiar with are stridulation type sounds. The snapping shrimp that we've heard about makes a very powerful sound using its claw and cavitation, producing a cavitation in the water. Lots of varieties of ways that fish make sounds.
Thank you. As an acoustic researcher, how do you identify specific animals in an ocean chorus?
Well, it can be quite challenging to identify sounds. Most of the sounds we hear have not been documented. And in many cases, what we need is actual visual proof of a particular sound to be able to accurately attribute it. So we're often forced to use circumstantial evidence to decide that this sound must be from a particular fish. So what scientists do is they will look at the acoustic characteristics of the sound. So in this slide on the bottom, you see what's called a spectrogram. This is a three-dimensional image of acoustic data. On the y-axis, you have the frequency of the sound, which is the pitch. On the x-axis, you have the time. So in this particular graph, there's about 80 seconds of recording. And the color corresponds to the loudness of that sound at that frequency. So right about 1.2 kilohertz or 1200 hertz, you see a dark band, red band running across the slide, and that's the sound of cuskills. And to identify those sounds, if we know them well, we can listen, but most of the time we actually have to zoom in on that and look at the actual acoustic structure, the frequency structure, and the pulse structure of the sound to be able to accurately identify the sound if it is known.
So Mrs. Roberson and Captain Todd talked about non-biological sounds. Are you also able to identify anthropogenic sounds on the spectrogram?
Yes, there's many types of anthropogenic sounds, as you've heard. In this particular case, there's a sound of an outboard motor approaching the area. And as you can see toward the middle of the slide, there's a broad, what we call broadband spectrum sound basically saturating the recording. So the Cuskill chorus sound that we're seeing here is a very loud sound where hundreds of individuals are calling at the same time. But it's drowned out as the outboard motor approaches. And you can kind of see, if you were listening to this, you would basically just hear a constant roar of the outboard. But you can see in the spectrogram, you can still see that the Cuskill is still trying to call. It just can't be heard because of the noise. And once the boat leaves, the chorus continues. So it's just a good example of how noise can disrupt our natural environment.
Thank you, Dr. Rountree. From hurricanes to snapping shrimp to upcalls from a right whale, such sounds compose immersive experiences important for wildlife, wilderness, visitors, and cultural events. Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation invites you to listen to the acoustic soundscape recordings in the NOAA Underwater Sound Monitoring Study so you can make your own discoveries. Immerse yourself in our Sanctuary Soundscapes project on SoundCloud to hear the most common sounds at Grays Reef, and then try your hand at identifying what else you hear in our playlist. All you have to do is listen, comment, and enjoy. And I guarantee the sound quality is much better than this webinar tonight. Many thousands of hours of passive acoustic recordings have been collected at Grays Reef. And we're calling all citizen scientists and students to take a deeper dive into the project data analysis and help us catalog the soundscape. You can register to be a volunteer for the Grays Reef Sanctuary Soundscapes crowdsourcing project. A web training tutorial will be provided to introduce the NOAA dataset, Raven Light imaging software, and reporting processes. So please find us at graysreefnmsf.org and register your participation. Amara, are we ready to take any questions for our speakers?
We are ready, but we don't have any questions quite yet. I think we should give some time to see if anyone.
Okay, I do see one question here. It says, what is the hydrophone model and manufacturer? Frequency range and radius of detection is what they're looking for. Kim, any ideas on that hydrophone model?
Sure, it sounds like that's a question just for me. It is, we call them sound traps. It's a company in New Zealand, and we have used at Grays Reef 2 different models. We're on the ST500 currently. We used prior to that the ST300. Again, it's a company out of New Zealand called Sound Traps. Ocean Instruments is the broader company name.
Thank you.
I can interject in that if you don't mind. I get this question a lot in terms of detection range, and it depends on, one, the sensitivity of the hydrophone, but it also depends on two other things. How loud is the organism calling, and what are the background sounds that might mask that? So it's just like you, if you're standing next to someone speaking, you might be able to whisper and they can hear you. But if there's a jackhammer going on nearby, you have to shout at the top of your lungs. So it really depends. How loud is the fish calling, and what are the noises around?
Okay. We have another question.
Jody, if I could on that, just to
please.
round out Dr. Rowntree's answer, and it was mentioned earlier in your presentation, at Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary, we are learning that our sanctuary, compared to some of the other sanctuaries that are participating in this project, is actually considered a more natural or quieter sanctuary. Of course, we do have those really loud snapping shrimp, but in terms of the anthropogenic or human-sourced noise, it's one of the quieter sanctuaries that are participating in this event.
Great. And we have a question about dolphins and how they make and interpret sound. I suppose how they use sound to communicate. Anyone want to take on dolphins? Not hearing any dolphin pros in
This is Kim. I am not a dolphin expert. I was kind of waiting to see if either Dr. Rountree or Todd wanted to pick that one up. We have what we do consider dolphin noises that have been recorded at Grays Reef, and we know we've actually also seen them visually while we've been out there diving and on top side of the boat. But I do not know, not being an animal sound expert myself, how dolphins actually produce that sound.
This is Rodney Rountree. I'm not an expert on cetacean sounds either, but I could tell you a little bit that, not in terms of mechanism, but in terms of how they utilize the sounds. As most of you all know, many dolphins use high frequency sounds for echolocating. So they use that to find their prey and to navigate the environment. They also use sounds to communicate to each other, different behavior, whether it's aggression or sounds to keep the pods together. And another thing that they do that a lot of people may not be aware of is they listen for sounds to navigate an environment. But they particularly listen to sounds of vocal fishes, and they key in on that sound to find fishes. So they often prey predominantly on fishes like the toadfish and grunts and drums and cuskills that make these sounds that then expose them to predation from the dolphins.
Oh, very interesting. Another question, is there any consideration in adding hydrophones or similar devices to aquariums to find base animal sounds? So definitely, Dr. Rountree, that one's to you again.
Yes, people have been doing that for decades. Scientists have been studying fish sounds since the 1800s. Obviously, in those days, they didn't have hydrophones. They just had to just listen to the sounds with their own ears. But yeah, much of what we know about fish sounds comes from laboratory studies where the sounds are recorded in aquaria or even large tanks, hundreds or even thousands of gallon tanks. One caution about that is often the sounds that are recorded in the laboratory may be somewhat different from what's recorded in the field, because often these are based on specimens that have been bred in captivity or have been held in captivity for a long time. So sometimes their behaviors are different. And in many fishes, it's very difficult to do that kind of work in the laboratory because most fishes will only make sounds associated with particular behaviors. And if you can't elicit that behavior in the laboratory, you'll never hear that sound. So if the fish, like this cuskeel, some of the drums are making the sound to attract females as part of their courtship, and you can't get them to spawn in the laboratory, you won't hear that sound. So laboratory type work in aquariums is very, very important. But we also need studies like this in Gray's Reef to identify sounds in the field. And again, most of these sounds can be unknown, but once we can catalog when and where these sounds occur, then scientists have a better ability to go out and identify what is making those sounds.
Great, thank you for that. Also, what will the timing for the webinar training for citizen science be? How will it be advertised? So I'll take that one. We are launching that citizen science project this fall, so stay tuned. There is a registration button on graysreefnmsf.org website, so please find our citizen science page there. Register to receive updates for the project and for the upcoming training, and we'll be happy to make sure that you're involved. Another question, how loud is too loud at Gray's Reef? Kim, do you have a good sense of that?
Sure, thank you, Jody. I was looking for that mute button. I sometimes can see it and sometimes I can't. How loud is too loud? I think that that's part of what this study is going to inform us on. We do know that animals, like Dr. Rountree said, use sound for a number of different functions, how they communicate, how they signal to others, how they find mates to reproduce, how they find food. So we know that sound and animal sound is important for the overall health of organisms. And we know that there is anthropogenic noise that's produced when we also utilize these special ocean places. But we don't yet know exactly how loud is too loud. So please do stay tuned as we continue to find out more about the sanctuary.
This is Dr. Rountree again. I'd like to comment on that too. It depends on what organism you're talking about. Many of the whales are producing very, very loud sounds that travel for miles or hundreds of miles. They can be detected even under some fairly heavy noise loads. But many of our fishes produce very quiet sounds that can only be heard a matter of meters or yards away. So those are much more susceptible to anthropogenic noise than some of the whale sounds. But even some of the whale sounds can be masked by large, very loud sounds.
Thank you. Another question is, does sound travel better underwater or above water? Captain Recicar, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that most definitely it travels better underwater. I've had experiences where I've been diving or snorkeling, and you can hear a boat's engine, and you look up to the top of the water and you see the boat is sometimes a mile or two away, but yet you can still hear it underwater. So that's most definitely sound traveling better underwater.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question. Someone is looking for resources that introduce the reef ecosystem, primary species, and important ecosystem processes. Most of those resources can be found linked on our website. Whatever you cannot find on graysreefnmsf.org, I would also suggest trying graysreef.noaa.gov, which is the official site for Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary. Another question here is there a concern that fishers may start applying the research in order to develop product to attract fish? So are there concerns about sound producing devices that may attract fish that you're aware of? Anyone?
Yeah, I can answer that. This is Rodney again. Actually, there's already quite a lot of that in freshwater systems. If anybody that fishes for largemouth bass or any recreational fish, you'll find in the market a wide array of fishing lures that are designed to make sounds to attract the fish. In some ways, fortunately, in other ways not. Most of those sounds are beyond the hearing ability of the fish in the first place, so they're really just catching a fisherman. But yeah, there is interest of some fishermen in this type of application, but it hasn't progressed very far as I know. Of more concern would be of them using the sound to find fish to then exploit. And that's been an issue in like some of the Caribbean areas where Nassau grouper aggregate in large concentrations, and we need to protect those spawning aggregations. So it is some issue, but it hasn't become a big issue right yet.
Great. Another question for you, Dr. Rountree. You mentioned being able to identify sounds other than vocalizations, such as fish farts. Can fish flatulence be identified to species just by sound alone, or does it require a visual identification too?
Well, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, we know very little about this type of sound in marine systems. But the work that I've done and my colleagues have done in freshwater systems suggests that yes, you can identify fish based on their air movement sounds, as we call it. In some cases, these are what's commonly known as the farts, but more common are things that I would call coughs and burps that are produced by a similar mechanism. So yeah, there's good potential for that.
Great. And do sharks make noise like fish, or have sharks been identified or observed on hydrophone data that you know of?
This is Rodney again. Yeah, as far as we know, most sharks lack mechanisms for producing sounds of the types that we've been talking about. Pretty much all fishes probably make what we call passive vocalizations or passive sonar sounds, which is swimming sounds, sounds of feeding, things like that. So sharks undoubtedly make those type of sounds. There's only been a few records of potential sound, purposeful sound production by any of the sharks or rays, and those are somewhat doubtful. They're quite old records, but we don't know. They haven't been examined for sound as much as many other fishes. But what is very important for them is not vocalization, but for listening. So it's very important to have a good soundscape so that that's not disrupted by noise so much, because sharks depend on locating prey and navigating by listening to their environment.
Okay, great. Thank
If
you
I
for
could
that.
also add to that about some specific research we have going on at Grays Reef that certainly is complementary to our hydrophone study. We do also have an acoustic technology project going on at Grays Reef where we tag animals, and their acoustic tag then transmits a specific signal that is picked up on our acoustic array, which is also equipment that we have in the water out at Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary. And we're able to couple this information that gives us locations and times of individual animals and pair it with our hydrophone data, with our underwater listening information, and see what types of fish move and what types of noises are being produced at the same time that those movements occur.
That's very interesting research. Will there be audio files to be researched by citizen scientists from all 8 sanctuaries or Gray's Reef only? So I'll take that one. Yes, there will be many additional sites that are available. There's a very large study that NOAA has undertaken to understand ocean sound. And so, yes, there are 8 sanctuaries and a number of host other sites that are recording this passive acoustic recordings from our ocean. All of that data is publicly accessible through NOAA. So yes, those citizen science training opportunities will point you in the direction of all of that data so that you know how to access it and then what to do with it. We'll teach you how to look at that data and actually visualize it to begin to see some of the patterns or signatures of specific species or certain things that we may be looking for in different frequency ranges. So there, just within the Gray's Reef data set, there may be 15,000 hours of recordings, and that's just one site out of many that are included in the study. So yes, there's an abundance of data that's just ready and waiting for you citizen scientists. And another question, since we love our sea turtles in the Southeast, do we know about sea turtle sounds, especially during nesting season?
This is Rodney again. I'll answer that. I get asked that question sometimes, including just the other day. Unfortunately, we know very little about soniferous behavior of turtles, and I'm not aware of any studies, at least anything published on sea turtles. In fact, the only study I know of looking at sound production by turtles is of some freshwater turtles in Australia, and they found a huge repertoire, all kinds of sounds that the turtles make only underwater. Now we do know that sea turtles and things like tortoises sometimes make a hissing sound on land when they're disturbed, but we don't know if they make any sounds underwater. My guess is that they do. It's just that it's something that hasn't been studied, to my knowledge.
Some of the sounds that may be picked up on our hydrophones might be able to be linked to sea turtles underwater, not so much, a potential vocalization, like Dr. Rountree says. We're not sure that they actually do produce sounds themselves underwater, but we know that at Gray's Reef and probably in other locations as well, they utilize these ledges kind of as, I call them, sea turtle garages. So they'll pull themselves up underneath a ledge and kind of scoot, scoot, scoot back and forth and carve out and actually wear down the underneath sides of some of these ledges to make room for themselves to sort of park and rest for a while. So I certainly think that the noise caused by the friction of the turtles scratching and carving out these sea turtle garages is a possibility being picked up on the hydrophones.
If I can interject, that's really an interesting observation. And I'd like to point out that sometimes it's not just purposeful sounds that can give us really useful information. Sometimes it's things like feeding sounds. If we hear crunching of a fish or invertebrates, or we hear their movements, that can tell us something about the activity patterns of the animal, which is very difficult information to get other methods. So yeah, all those kinds of things are very important and some of the things we'd like to get.
Great discussion. Thank you for that. Since the pandemic and its subsequent reduction of human activity, has Gray's Reef become easier to study? Kim?
That is a great question. And while our hydrophones were out and deployed during I'll say the peak of the sheltering at home and what we assume is the quiet time at Gray's Reef, we aren't sure that they were actually recording through that entire space and time. We're very hopeful that they did, that the batteries lasted long enough and the space on the cards was large enough to record that entire period. I currently have the 3 hydrophones at my house, and we'll be deploying that data set, those sound files during what we assume is the quietest period at Grays Reef during the shutdown. But I also have a little bit of a curious thought that perhaps out at Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary, it might not have been very quiet. We know that a lot of boaters in the area enjoy boating, and we know that we had quite a lot of good weather during this shutdown period, and that people were looking for opportunities to do things and do them safely. So being on a boat with your stay-at-home pod or your quarantine family on a boat outside might have actually been an activity that a lot of people chose to participate in. So we're actually really anxious to get the sound files downloaded from this current deployment and learn what we find.
Very good point. Thank you for that. Are there any studies regarding the relative anthropogenic noise level, an important nursery or juvenile habitat for fishes? And is that something that you think projects like this should focus on in the future? Kim, I'll pitch that back to you.
Yeah, I think that was a multi-part question. Can you repeat it?
Yes. Yes. Are there any studies regarding the relative anthropogenic noise level in important nursery or juvenile habitat for fishes?
Yes, there certainly are. I'm going to answer a little bit of this, but I also am hedging my bets that Dr. Rountree will have something to say here too that might be much more experienced. But speaking for Grays Reef specifically, we don't have studies on juvenile noises and spawning aggregations as of yet. That's part of what this project is all about. But there certainly should be already studies that talk about or address the questions of anthropogenic noises on aggregations and on juveniles. Dr. Rountree?
Yes, it's a very good question. There's been an explosion in scientific research on the effects of noise on fishes and other marine animals in the last few decades. So there's quite a lot of interest in this, a lot of concern. There's a lot of concern about not just fishing activities, but seismic blasting in some cases. What are these seismic surveys doing to fish communities? But yeah, there's a lot of research around the world on this type of the effect of anthropogenic noise on fishes and other animals now. And just in nearby in South Carolina, there's some groundbreaking studies in the estuaries on the importance of noise to estuarine fishes. And that's just one example relatively nearby. So yeah, it's an important topic. In this data set, one of the things that I hope that can come out of it through citizen science is just having the citizens go through and determine when and where these anthropogenic sounds occur. Like what percentage of the time is there a boat in a particular area? And then we can correlate that with what percentage of the time X fish sound occurs. So those can be very powerful things that we can get out of a citizen science program.
Great, thank you both for that. And so at Grays Reef, are you able to do videotaping or video recording along with audio to help determine the species of fish making the sound?
These are all fantastic questions. I am enjoying this so much. We actually do collaborate with a researcher who is videotaping and doing some sound recording as well, looking at fish predation interactions. So at Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary, we're lucky to work with a lot of professors and university students as well who are eager to coordinate and work together. So we're very hopeful that we will continue to utilize these tools, the hydrophones, the underwater recordings that we have, the acoustic technology and tracking of animal movement that we have, as well as some of the video recording looking at predator-prey interactions over the course of the days and nights at Gray's Reef, to bring all of it together and really start answering some of these questions that you all are asking. So thank you for that.
That is definitely high on the agenda, to pair a camera with our the hydrophones that are out there, so that we can not only correctly identify those sounds that we think we are hearing in the data, but also for the purposes of telepresence, to be able to offer the sounds and the sights of Gray's Reef remotely would be a fantastic project, and certainly that is high on the agenda. So one day we'll have that available to you all, and we'll provide another Science on Tap to introduce that data set.
That's right, Katie. I'm glad you mentioned that one. Just a little bit more of a plug here for that. I do think that not only can we use these tools for science, but also for introducing people to the reef and bringing the sanctuary to the people. So not only combining all of these different tools that we have in our toolbox for science, but also for citizen science, for learning about the reef, and for showcasing the amazing place that it is.
Hear, hear. Thank you for that. And thank you for all your fantastic questions. That looks like it for our chat box. So let me just say, stay tuned for updates about the Gray's Reef Sanctuary Soundscape Citizen Science Project. The project page is live on SoundCloud right now, and you can link to it and other resources on our website. Thank you so much to our guest presenter, Mrs. Amara Davis, and our speakers, Dr. Rodney Rountree, Captain Todd Recicar, and Mrs. Kimberly Roberson. Until next time, take care of yourself, each other, and our ocean planet. Thank you for joining us for Science on Tap, and have a great night.